Hello and welcome to this, our second webinar of this season. So thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about neurodiversity, and we know that raising and supporting neurodivergent children, whether it's ADHD, autism, or sensory differences, it is both deeply rewarding and at times can be overwhelming. There's so much information out there, and we are often trying to piece together what might work and what might help your child thrive. So today I bring together two different practitioners who are experts in this field. I am joined by Judith Katz, who is a specialist ADHD coach, and Sarah Morris, nutritionist who specialises in supporting brain health and specifically children. So do you two want to start? Judith, let's start with you. Give us a sort of little overview about yourself and how you work.
Okay, so I am Judith. I come from an education background. I have worked for, I suppose nearly 30 years when I think about it, across various types of education. And I moved into private practice probably about 4 years ago. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. I have two neurodivergent children. I home educated them for a little bit. They are back in mainstream. My eldest is now in university.
Amazing. And Sarah?
Well, yeah, hello, I'm Sarah. So, as Tiff said, I'm a children's nutritional therapist and I work in all areas of children's health, but I do specialise in ADHD and gut health. And that's because I myself have an ADHD diagnosis that I got when I was at university. And my son, my little 8-year-old little son, he's got ADHD and has had gut health issues. So it's something really personal to me, and it's an area that I've really explored myself, as well as with families that I work with.
Amazing. So, Sarah, I'm going to sort of come to you first. And, when we talk about neurodiversity, we often focus on behavior and the way they learn, obviously, with schools. From a nutrition's perspective, what's sort of happening in the body that we might not realize? I mean, I think all of us have done that thing where we've given chocolate or sweets to the kids and you've watched their behavior kind of explode. But do you want to talk to us, tell us a little bit about, what's actually going on?
Well, I mean, food is fuel. If you don't have the right fuel, it's going to be really hard to function properly. And whether that's a neurodiverse child or an atypical child, like you said, we've all seen that sort of post-birthday party, the sort of, the rise and fall of blood sugar. And I think it's giving our children the basic building blocks to be able to, sorry, my doorbell's just gone conveniently. We'll ignore that. To make neurotransmitters, to balance their blood sugar, to reduce their inflammation so that they can, be the best version of themselves, ADHD or not.
Absolutely. Are there particular sort of nutrition elements and dietary patterns that are especially important for neurodiversity, for sort of focus and function?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really key essential nutrients. And these nutrients are ones that we, through testing, find to be low a lot of the time in children with ADHD. And they include things like zinc, magnesium, omega-3, B vitamins, iron, they're really key, whether it's that children have an extra need for them or they're just burning through these nutrients, they can be low. And the moment they are low, it really affects things like learning, behavior, focus, and makes things more difficult. So getting those nutrients in can make a really big impact on your child's sort of overall health and specifically ADHD traits. So yeah, there's lots of things to do with diet, but I'd say that things like balancing blood sugar is a really key area in ADHD and can really make a serious difference to their day to day.
Yeah, and that just took me back to one of the, Clarkson Farm episode where he was talking about nutritional deficiency in soil and how that, the food is grown now and you think, oh, yes, that's great, I'm eating a broccoli. But actually, it doesn't have the sort of nutritional density and components that actually it would have had maybe 20, 25 years ago because the minerals are just not in the soil anymore. It's vaguely terrifying. So do you find that it's about changing food or is it about adding supplements?
It's both. I'd say we should always start with food. Food is the basics because food doesn't just provide you with one nutrient, like a zinc supplement, is zinc. And that's brilliant. But food gives us a range of nutrients, micro and macronutrients that we need. So food's brilliant. And I think that should always be the basis. But for certain people, regardless of how well they eat, like you mentioned, like the soil, absorption of nutrients can be different in different people's bodies and link a lot to gut health. So it's a lot about getting everything in the diet, but supplements can be a really good scaffold. Whether you're dealing with something like fussy eating. So it's really hard to say to a parent whose child is eating a limited number of foods, well, you need all these nutrients. And they're probably thinking, well, I'm trying my best. So it's about working with individual families and individual children, assessing what they need. But yeah, absolutely. Diet first, supplements should always be supplementing a diet, not
Yeah.
taking from it.
I think it's also difficult because I think there's a lot of sort of education to be done around what sort of nutrients they actually need something else to actually make that original nutrient absorbable or workable or usable within the body. And so, people are like, oh, yes, I'm getting lots of that. I'm like, you might be getting lots of that, but you probably need something else to sort of make your body realize, oh, I can use it. Um, so you mentioned gut health. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the importance in gut health and how that can sort of influence mood and behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge amount of research going into gut health and has been coming out for the last 20 years. So we're finding out more and more all the time. But we know, for one thing, the gut-brain axis is a bi-directional communication between the gut and the brain. And we actually know that there's more messages sent from the gut to the brain than the brain to the gut.
Mm.
So it is, and we know that ourselves. Think about when you're feeling really nervous, you get butterflies. When you're really stressed, it might change how your digestion's working. So we can see these changes ourselves, but they can be really pronounced in children. And not only does, it affects a huge amount of areas, the brain included, but it also makes neurotransmitters. Our gut bacteria actually make these neurotransmitters we really need for ADHD. Inflammation is a really key area as well, and that can start in the gut, and the gut can have a huge impact on that, and the immune system as well. So there's a huge sort of amount of areas to look into when we're looking at gut health. But we do know that ADHD children and adults have a higher likelihood to have gut issues. It's really something that we find to be really common. So finding out what exactly is going on with the gut, whether that's through testing or just looking at the symptoms and creating a plan to help calm everything down, support absorption. Because again, you can eat the best diet, but if your gut isn't in a great place, it's not going to absorb the nutrients in this brilliant diet, and it's not really going to help that much. So it is a really key area to focus on, and it's something that we tend to start with quite early on in the process.
So this could be quite controversial, and actually, I haven't told you I'm going to ask you this. It just like suddenly came to my mind. But thinking about that, is there a way in which some of the sort of displayed symptoms of neurodiversity can actually be reversed?
I think saying reversed is tricky because it's all on a spectrum, isn't it? So we all have this range. But from my own personal health, from my son's health, and from the people I've worked with, I've seen time and time again, when you can change gut health for the better and support the gut, it can have really significant effects on behavior, on learning. The science is there without going into the deep and dives of the science. If we don't have the right foods to support the gut, if the gut isn't in the good place, it's going to be felt. So making changes in that direction and improving things, it can really impact. Yeah.
Amazing. So, I mean, I did a little bit on embryology a couple of years ago, and I found it fascinating that actually, at that point of conception, and you have the sort of three areas of where cells are being developed, and there's one pathway that actually turns into the brain cells, and the same pathway lines the gut as well. So you have exactly the same cells creating the brain and the lining of the gut. So I feel like that tells you all you need to know about how important food is, and the reliance at the moment on processed food and quick food, and people have lost the skill. Parents have lost the skill of actually cooking from fresh, and at the time as well. No longer are we just able to be at home creating a home. And there's so many different pulls in your time that actually becomes incredibly difficult to create fresh food 7 days a week.
Yeah, really hard.
So, what are some realistic sort of changes that parents and families could put into place without sort of overhauling their entire kitchen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think It's small changes. It's not about overhauling, and it's small changes made over time because, like you said, we're all, time poor at the moment, especially if you're dealing with a neurodiverse child. It can be extra overwhelming, extra emotional. So, and making changes, especially for a child who might have real sensory issues with food or have a really specific diet plan that they want to follow, it can be difficult. So it is about making small steps and going from where a family is and making changes that are suitable for them. There's not a one size fits all. But I would say one of the best places people can start is with breakfast. How we start the day has such an impact on the rest of the day. It's so hard to go backwards. If you've had a bad start to the day, we know that as adults, to go backwards and then sort of, calm everything down and get everything working right. So starting with a really good quality breakfast with protein, with healthy fats. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. We might be saying if you're having Weetabix, for example, can you over time add a little bit of chia seeds and a little bit of flaxseed in, starting with a quarter of a teaspoon a day, so it's really not overwhelming. Can we add some berries or banana on? If you're having porridge, can we put some peanut butter in to add some more protein? It's not about saying change everything. It's about saying, where are you now? And what can we do to work with where you are now to get you to a better place? But I do think that balancing a child's blood sugar before they go to school has a huge impact on their day.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And are there sort of common sort of challenges that you see again and again in clinic when it comes to these sort of neurodiverse children?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really tricky because you get parents who come in and they know what they're meant to do. They know what they want to do. They are seeing these nutrients mentioned everywhere. They're seeing these things you're meant to be eating, but they're also then living day to day with a child who might only like 10 foods.
Yeah.
Or doesn't want vegetables or all these sorts of things. And there can be real sensory issues. There can be gut health issues which can really impact. And fussy eating is a huge part of working with neurodiversity and with children. And a lot of the time, it's not about sort of saying, well, how do we change fussy eating? It's about looking at why. So why are they fussy eating? Why are they having sensory experiences? Is it to do with, are they low in essential nutrients that affect taste and smell? So if we don't, zinc, for example, is one of them, really integral for taste and smell. And a lot of kids are low in zinc. So if you don't have zinc, you're not going to taste the food properly, smell the food properly. It affects digestion. So it affects how well the food is being processed, how it's feeling, whether it's sitting on your chest, whether it's making you feel uncomfortable. So it's about looking at why and then addressing those reasons and seeing how that can actually impact a child as they go forward. And what we find is normally as you make those changes over time, suddenly kids start to show more interest in food. They start to be more open. If they feel better, they start to be more sort of keen to try new things. But it is normally it's a low and slow process. So it's starting where you are and making these small steps.
Yeah, I mean, if you knock out two of the senses when it comes to food, then that's hugely, they're at a disadvantage, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and if your gut feels really uncomfortable, which a lot of kids do, but if they've had gut issues from when they were born, they don't know that that's not right. That's normal to them. So when you start to investigate these things and talk to the child or talk to the parents and realize they might not be very comfortable, they might not feel good when they're eating certain foods.
Yeah.
So actually, we need to deal with the gut first and make it more comfortable for them. And then they suddenly are like, oh, actually, I'm really hungry now and I can eat these things and enjoy them.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, moving on to Jude then. So for parents who may be new to this world, just coming into it, how do you explain neurodiversity in a way that helps parents and carers to sort of really understand their child better?
Neurodiversity is basically the concept that there are many different neurotypes. Our brains work differently, and that these are natural variations within a population. That's basically it. I mean, the one thing I like to do is think about plants. In a garden, you might have different kinds of plants, and different plants need different things. You might need to plant some where they've got lots of sun. You might need to plant some that are in a bit more shade. Some plants need an acidic environment. Some plants need a more alkaline environment. And it's about getting those conditions for growth right. And I think what, Sarah, you were saying about asking about the why are these things happening is really, really important. in that process.
Hmm. And so, what are some of the biggest challenges that you feel people are sort of bringing to you that you try and sort of help them navigate?
Biggest sorts of challenges tend to be transitions, so going into school or coming back out of school,
Mm.
um, things like homework, emotionally based school non-attendance, um, issues with not knowing how to approach work, approach revision, because they've often been things that just feel too big. Revise is a really, really big instruction. Tidy your room is a really big instruction. And children with problems with for example, executive functioning, and we'll get to that a bit later, are going to find that sort of instruction really difficult to manage.
So a lot of that sort of seems to be around kind of educational sort of settings and in those environments.
Yes.
So I'm going to spring another question on you. How much do you feel that actually the educational settings have a kind of a lot to answer for and maybe aren't catering at all for those sort of different diversities?
Absolutely. I really think that the way things are done now does not suit all children. It doesn't suit really quite a large percentage of children. Um, I don't know, perhaps some of the parents watching this now will have noticed that there's been a little bit of a sensation, perhaps in the community of psychologists and educationalists, that a very well-known professor of neuroscience, Uta Frith, has expressed her reservations about the concept of the neurodiverse spectrum, a neurodiversity spectrum. And I think in part, the issue is how we expect children to thrive in a system that expects them all to reach certain milestones at certain times.
Is that what it's lost, do you think? Like, I don't know, back when we were at school, I just don't remember having the amount of exams and, all the tick boxes in education that they seem to have now. And that,
Right.
our children navigating that maybe just in a different way than, has ever happened before.
With huge stress. And of
Yeah.
course, the the bigger the classrooms, the more children you have, the more you have to try and find some way of accommodating everyone. It's hard for teachers, it's hard for children, it's hard for parents.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you mentioned executive functioning there. Do you want to, I think we're hearing that term a lot at the moment.
Which is
Do you want to
great.
explain what that means?
Okay, so executive functions, it's great that people are starting to learn more about what that means, because certainly when I started coaching executive function skills, people were asking, well, does that mean you coach executives and you work out what happens at their functions? No, the executive functions is basically a term that refers to the brain-based processes that enable us to plan, organize, direct our attention, resist impulses, that sort of thing. So pretty much every task we do is connected to, every higher level task we do is connected to those executive functions. And one thing that people often don't realize is that they don't develop fully. The part of the brain where executive functioning is associated, is linked, doesn't develop till children are, well, adults in their mid to late 20s, which is why it's really hard to get affordable car insurance when your child has just learnt to drive.
So what are some practical tools that carers can start using at home to support some of these, executive functions or some of the routines or transitions?
Some practical tools. Often working memory is an issue, and being able to sequence tasks. So a really practical, really simple task is to make instructions visual, especially with younger children. But even for adults, I mean, if you think of an IKEA set of instructions, they're all visual, aren't they? it would be impossible. I mean, they're hard enough to follow anyway, to be honest, but imagine them as just given as verbal instructions or as written instructions. It would really be hard.
Yeah.
So scaffold with visual instructions. Things like making time visual. Notice beside me, I've got this lovely little clock, because keeping track of time is often really difficult for neurodivergent children. Actually, this is mine. It really helps me. Part of the issue with time blindness is that you don't really have a sense of how long things are taking. Something that is really interesting to you, 5 minutes go by in a second. If it's really boring, 5 minutes feels like an hour. We've all felt like that on the treadmill, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Other things. And I'm going to, well, here we are. I have my own notes. So this is one of my little scaffolds, have notes to refer to. Time, I've now got, see, this is...
I'm going to find your notes.
I like to think that this makes me very well placed to anticipate the kind of things that might be difficult for families and teenagers who have ADHD.
Yeah. So I think I'm going back to the sort of transition time. So getting ready in the morning is a hell of a time for any parent or carer, trying to get children out of the house with the right uniform, with the right bags, having ticked all the boxes they're supposed to tick. Yeah. Is there a way that you can just give some advice on how you can sort of get them moving, get things done without sounding like you're continuously nagging or battling them?
Yeah, constant. Yes, I think try and externalize some of that scaffolding. So again, have a routine. Think to yourself, where is the friction actually happening? So I'll give you an example. One family, it was getting the children to go back upstairs after breakfast to put their socks on. And sometimes we get into the habit of just doing things because we've always done them that way. The socks are upstairs in the bedroom. Is there any reason they couldn't be in the cloakroom with the shoes? And just a little tiny shift like that can transform the whole process. So I think the main thing, that the biggest tip I would give is observe first. Really take a step back and think about where these pinch points are.
Yeah.
And then, only then, once you've identified the context in which these issues are happening, then you can start to find those little changes that make a lot of difference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anyone that is formally diagnosed in my house, but I definitely have someone who I think possibly should be diagnosed in my house. And one of the things I find in the morning is I can feel myself getting more and more irate. I feel the anger rising, and I've taken to breaking it, even though it's going to cost me time. I put on a song and I'm like, let's dance. Everyone, come on, quick dance. And it might cost me a minute, but actually it might save me 3 in trying to get the kids' shoes on and out the door. And actually, by the time we've danced for a minute, we're all in a much better mood. And then I can say, oh, can you put your shoes on? And then that kind of happens. Whereas I've been asking 10 times up until that point.
Yeah.
It's either that or, you go from 0 to, screaming in a flick of a switch. So
I mean, there we go. There's a solution. That's a really, really good one. And often parents are able to come up with these amazing solutions when they feel empowered to do so. And I think the point that you made about having a child who displayed many traits but wasn't diagnosed, there's the crux of it. We don't work, or I don't work with children necessarily with diagnoses. I work with what's happening for that child at that time, that family at that time. So it's where things can go wrong is where we think, oh, right, a child has this diagnosis or that diagnosis, so that must mean. And it's not necessarily the case, because, as I'm sure many people have heard, you've met one neurodivergent child, you've met one neurodivergent child. Everybody has a very different, a different profile.
Yeah.
Similar but
Um,
different.
Great. So, sort of throwing some questions at both of you. So, for a family, parents and carers who are feeling a little bit overwhelmed today, they don't know where to start. Can you give maybe just one suggestion as a sort of first small step? Go on, Sarah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think back to what I said, maybe just start with breakfast. Just try and get a good quality, nutrient-rich breakfast. Whether that's eggs, whether that's porridge, whether that's, nut butter on toast. If your kids loves jam on toast, just getting some peanut butter or almond butter under that jam can be that first step in balancing those sort of bit more protein, bit more healthy fats. And I would start there, and just that, and maybe just hydration. Just make sure they're hydrated. You know, it's so easy for kids to just go through the whole day without drinking, and then we wonder why they're tired, why they're angry, and think of how we feel when we're like that.
Yeah. Judith?
I would say curiosity and collaboration. So rather than being the directive parent all the time, obviously we have to do that a lot of the time, ask questions like, oh, how can we do this? What do we think? Get the child's point of view. It can really transform your relationship.
Great. Well, I'd say get in touch with one of our amazing practitioners who can help you on that journey. And I think that, another big element of this is that as a parent or carer, you're not necessarily there supporting just one child. You've got the whole
Yeah.
family sort of dynamic to contend with. Any small suggestions for how you can sort of support everyone's sort of nervous system in a sort of a house, in a home? Go on, Jude, carry on.
Again, I think it really does come back to that collaboration and letting everyone's voice be heard and explain. Try, understanding, find out as much as you can about this particular profile. Sarah, you were saying something. I mean, an example would be the with the picky eating. That's something I see a lot in my families, and I would direct those families to Sarah, who is an immensely knowledgeable person about this sort of thing. But Sarah was talking about the context, and the context extends to that emotional context as well as the physical, the food context. Because when we are tired, overwhelmed, angry, scared, we tend to go back to things that feel comforting. Children are less likely to try new foods that will eventually help their mood if they are low on nutrients, as Sarah said, but also if they are feeling pressure from their circumstances, they retreat.
Yeah. Sarah, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, Judith's spot on, absolutely. Well, with fussy eating, it is very complex. And yeah, the more pressure you put on, the more they retreat. So, I mean, with getting your kids to eat, I would sort of say exactly like Judith was saying, take the pressure off, try and get them involved. That might be you're just serving everything like buffet style. So let them choose their own food. Don't ask them to eat. Even if, think of the division of responsibility. Your job is to put the food on the table. Their job is to choose what they eat. It can be frustrating. It can be really hard, but the more you push, the more you pressure, the less they're likely to do it. So, try and take the pressure off yourself. Just always try and put something they like on the plate, even if it's one food. And then just know that changes take time. Even for an atypical child, it can take 15 exposures to a food easily for them to eat it, even more for a neurodiverse child. So just keep going, keep making those small changes, and try and just focus on being relaxed together as a family to keep everyone sort of calm and feeling good around food.
Yeah.
I think I would. Oh, sorry, Judith. I was just going to give my take on a little something that again I've used. I use a lot of essential oils in the house and the home, and I mean doTERRA is the brand that I use, but they have one called Balance, and they also have a rollerball called In Tune. And both of those, I have the Balance going in the humidifier thing, and as soon as the children smell it, you can see their whole demeanor kind of just changing and just chilling out. It's like those beautiful essential oils that have been around forever. hit the pituitary gland and actually, make some fundamental changes. And the in tune that comes as a rollerball, my child has access to it herself. So I say to her, if I start to see her going, I'm like, do you want to go and get your oil? And she's like, yeah, I do, yeah. It's empowering her. She walks with a little rollerball and rolling it around and smelling it. And again, it's like kind of diffuses the situation, gives them something to do. And also, your house is then filled with all these amazing smells. And again, it's just something that's incredibly, incredibly calming.
But the sensory experience is really important,
Yeah.
especially for neurodivergent children who are often quite sensitive to that.
I interrupted you, Jude. What were you going to say?
I would love to say I can remember, Tiff, but unfortunately, I can't.
And it's
I'm
gone.
sure it was really well. It seemed important at the time. I think it was about context. Oh yes, it was about the pushing. Sarah mentioned pushing, and how that can cause children to retreat. And I was going to say something about the demand avoidance that often comes with neurodivergence. That it is, I think the term pathological demand avoidance, or as we sometimes call it, pervasive drive for autonomy, is something that's being heard about a little bit more. But demand avoidance, not necessarily pathological demand avoidance, but demand avoidant profiles are often quite common, and they often come from anxiety, and that allowing a little bit more autonomy, as Sarah was saying, with the foods can really help. Declarative language rather than like go and tidy your room, which would be a command, or do you want to go and tidy your room? To which the answer is usually no, I don't. Replacing that with a declaration. Okay, it's time to tidy your room now. Shall
Let's
we?
go.
Oh, exactly. Let's go.
Let's go. Amazing. Well, I think we've shared so much information. So thank you so much to you two. But we have just gone over our sort of timing. So we'll time to say goodbye. But we can be found obviously part of Seed Wellness. You can find us on the website there, and we are all part of the Henley team. You can also find us at the Human Repair Cafe, which is the last Friday of the month at the King's Arms Barn in Henley. So thank you very much for joining. All have a wonderful week, and we'll hopefully hear from us again soon.